Welcome to Directionally Correct, a P-Punks podcast with Cole and Scott. Today's guest, Andrew Pitts, founder and CEO of Polinode.
Thanks to our sponsors, Polinode. Harness the full power of organizational network analysis with Polinode. With one-click data integrations and built-in relationship-based surveys, Polinode enables people analytics practitioners to move from data to insights faster. To learn more and see why Polinode is trusted by some of the most innovative companies in the world today, book a demo at polinode.com/directionallycorrect. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization.
So do you remember my story about the guy that I held the door for him and he slid in like a fucking James Bond villain around the edge? Okay.
Mr. Slip and slide.
Yeah. So this is a longer story. Hopefully we can get through it. But there's something called I'll be obtuse and call it scavengers here. It's a Slack thread. So there's a million teams having offsites and they're all catered, right? So they always have food left over. Not always, but
you're speaking my language now.
But when they do have food left over, they put it on this what I call it scavengers, the Slack thread.
Yeah.
So I was at this building and it hit. It was like a minute previous, so it was it just fresh, and it's just the building across the street. So I was I'll get my shit and I'll walk over there. So I'm walking over there, and kind of the same thing happened. This guy, I'm holding the door for him, no thank you, no nothing. And he doesn't return the favor on the other double dare, and I'm hey, what a fucking dick, right? That so we go through security, and we're both walking, and oh boy, we both hit the fourth floor. That's weird. It's not like a common floor, that people would go to. And sure enough, we're both going to the vultures thing. So this guy's already kind of take me off, right? Because he's didn't return the door favor thing. And now he's in front of me in line, directly in front of me. Yeah. And it's a fajita bar, right? So they got little fajita chicken, and it's all picked over. I mean, it's you know, whatever.
But you could say they scavenged over it,
Exactly. And it's maybe it's one of those big metal trays, catering trays, and it's got maybe an eighth of it left. So, I mean, a good amount, more than one person should eat, especially when there's a line of 10 people behind you. This dude took out his own to-go container and he took all the meat, and there's a line of people what the hell? And then there's this massive bowl of Parmesan cheese, and he must have taken half of that too. I mean, more than you would see at Olive Garden. I mean, this thing was massive. And on one hand, you're hey, it's free. It's up for grabs. On the other hand, it's hey, we got a bunch of people here.
There is social decorum, man.
Yeah.
And these are the people that make me lose faith in humanity, right? Because just look around. Your social awareness, I don't know. You just have to be a person of 99th percentile, take advantage of other people type of individual to do that.
This is maybe this big city you live in, where everyone's on top of each other. I kind of liken it to when you used to go to the pet store and see the mice in the cage. They just kind of step on each other's heads and don't really care. And I think the same thing happens in big cities where people are well, I'm just going to get mine. No, I don't care about what you need or what you want.
Well, can I tell you kind of a similar story?
Please
that's
do.
Not as survival of the fittest. As when I was at it was very early in my career. I worked at let's call it a CPG company, right? They make stuff that you would find in the grocery store, and so they used to have these big displays that they were testing out in the lobby that they would be putting in grocery stores that would have tons and tons of their product. And
you're talking buy our thing, a big display.
Yeah, buy our thing. It's cool. You might have a Super Bowl one, right?
Yeah.
And it would be like that. And when they took those big displays down, they just gave away all the product internally.
Oh, okay.
And so every once in a while, you would literally see adults sprinting down the hallway and you'd be why is that person sprinting down the hallway? It's because they found out that they were taking down the big display, and you could literally get tens, if not hundreds of pieces of this product, right, to take home with you. And so what I did is that the lobby used to be across from the company store, and I literally paid the person who worked the desk at the company store and gave him my phone number to tell me when they were taking them down, and I'm
Yes.
telling you, I would bring home so much of this, it would last me like 6 months.
Like, what
And
what are we
so
talking about? Like, anything good, or is it, like,
oh, yeah,
sponges?
it's really good. Like, I probably brought home, if I had to estimate, $300 worth of this product. You know, and if you knew what the product was, like it was that's a substantial number of the product. I remember I had this box, this like cardboard box. You know, like they ship boxes with like couches in them sometimes.
Yeah, yeah,
Like a
massive.
box that size, completely filled to the top with this product, and I was like, oh, it was the best moment of my life.
I love watching people freak out over free, ostensibly trash stuff. You
Yeah.
know, like there's a lot of swag out there, and like thank the Lord for swag. Don't get me wrong, but some of it's like destined for the landfill. Like I'll walk through like an aisle in Target and be like, this is all just straight to trash, right? Like no one's. It
Yeah.
isn't durable. It isn't has no valuable value on the shelf.
I think about that all the time with like you know they ship stuff to your house and it has like stuffing in it to like packing like the things like
Like
stuff and
peanuts.
I was like what like peanuts but also like it's like plastic bags now and
Oh
like they
yeah,
have a
yeah.
bunch of different variants of it and I'm like wow they made this just to just like use for 10 minutes and then sit in a landfill for 100,000 years like you know I don't know that's the kind of stuff I think about.
I saw someone freaking out about throwing away like the grocery sacks you get at the grocery store. Like apparently
we
you're not supposed to do that.
we reuse those
Yeah.
but
Well, I mean
we
that's what they're saying. Like putting other grocery or pardon me, putting other
yeah.
trash in those things is apparently a no no. It's like why not?
Yeah, why you're gonna have to you're have a steep argument against me to try to convince me that you shouldn't reuse those.
You'll see some like wild behavior here in Seattle. Like you and I know somebody. I haven't told you this story, but they're moving out and their neighbor was going through the recycling bin, pulling
Mhm.
out trash and taking it to the residents that they could identify whose trash it was and be like, this isn't recyclable. Like quite literally insane behavior.
That is insane. Wow, that's insane level I've never experienced before. Like this
Who
is
has
banana peels clearly not recyclable. Like, oh my
you
god.
don't have enough to do. I
Yeah.
think that's what it comes down to. Like you don't have enough to do.
Well, like what do you have like a favorite Australian animal or thing that you'd want to see?
Yeah, I do have something that I want to see. I'd love to get Andrew's perspective on it, but
Yeah.
I want to see a road train.
What the heck is a road
A
train?
road train. Look this thing up. It is a oh, there he is. There he is.
Hey guys,
Well, maybe Andrew can explain it to us. What is a road train?
a road train is an epically long truck.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, they're mainly used in like the outback, and they just like keep going on and on for.
This is the one thing that not the one thing, but one of the things that I want to see in Australia. And last year I was in Prague and had the opportunity to sit next to a very lovely Australian couple, and I mentioned that the one thing I want to see is a road train, and they were endlessly tickled by this. Like,
It's-
why would you want to see
yeah,
that?
it's typically not on the list of highlights for people. Maybe like the Opera House or the Harbour Bridge or
No, 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 no. We don't need
Vegemite.
that. We don't need that.
This is possibly because my youth was influenced by Steve Irwin, but I want to see a saltwater crocodile so bad. Now, I thought they only existed in Australia, but my understanding is they actually exist all around like the, you know, Indo-Pacific area, but I think the biggest ones are in Australia, so I would really love to come to Australia and see a saltwater crocodile.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you don't see it live. I hope you go to a crocodile farm or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't want to like be
You don't
swimming and be like, "Hey, buddy, how you
happen
doing?"
upon one. Yeah, you need to
Yeah.
go. Has needs to have a sign or a pin at
Or
least, right?
crossing the road in your road train.
So
Well,
these road trains, by the way, they're like what 30 semi trucks long. I mean, they're forever long.
Yeah.
how did they not block the traffic? Like logistically, how does this work?
Well, they're mainly used in the outback, so there's not that much traffic.
Okay.
Middle of
Wow.
nowhere, and it's like a massive snake going down the road.
Mhm.
That's wild. Imagine trying to pass on the left. Or I guess, is it on the right in Australia?
It's
Whatever.
on
Passing on a 2-lane road. Passing
Or
like a
pass
half
on.
mile long one. You have to go like 150 miles an hour for like 30 minutes to pass it. I don't know. But well, have you ever seen like a saltwater crocodile, Andrew, while you were like ocean swimming? Sorry, I want to come back to this because I know you ocean swim.
Wait. So you go on the ocean, like deep water swimming? Is what I'm hearing?
Yeah, you just like swim out in the ocean, and yeah, it's for a couple of kilometers, and it's the most relaxing thing in the world. Not crocodiles, sometimes sharks, but yeah,
Well, I mean, just sharks.
I think crocodiles are actually more dangerous than sharks.
I believe that. Yeah.
Mm.
They see us as food. Sharks don't see us as food, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, what got you into ocean swimming? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, I don't know. I think it was probably about 10 years ago, and I just decided it was something I wanted to do. And yeah, there's a big ocean swim every year in Australia, and so I just decided to do that. And yeah, then yeah, obviously have to practice for it, and I just started to enjoy it.
Fascinating.
You got riptides to look out for, and I'm sure they have all this sort of marked, so they understand where this sort of stuff is, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's generally pretty safe.
Do you swim with the current or against the current? Are there like any kind of like tips and tricks for doing this effectively?
Don't swim out where the water looks calm, because that's generally where there's a riptide.
You see
Really?
a crocodile, you move away.
Yeah. Fair enough. I'm just me. I don't know anything about this. Thought I would ask good faith questions about ocean swimming.
I'm glad that we have someone here to really talk about networks, though. Andrew loves networks. Last year I made a network of these citations at PsyOp and posted it online, and he grabbed it and made it way cooler through the Polinode system, and I was like wildly impressed by this.
Yeah, thanks, Scotty. I don't know that I've actually mentioned this to you, but this year we're actually going to be at PsyOp. Polinode's going to be.
Oh, fantastic!
What?
Yeah. So
are you presenting? You have a booth?
No, just
what's the deal?
booth. So it'll be the first year. It's for quite a few years, people have been, encouraging me and saying, PsyOp is a conference that you really have to go to, and so yeah, we literally had the conversation with the PsyOp folks a week ago, and so we're going to have a booth, and so. We haven't yet decided, but we'd love to create another interesting network for PsyOp. So maybe what we're thinking is something like a citations network for the people that are presenting at PsyOp.
Well, that's fascinating.
Absolutely. This is breaking news. You're going to be at PsyOp. This is fantastic. We're going to have to get together.
Yeah, we better get together.
Yeah.
Because we've spoken a few times, but I don't think we've ever met in person.
I'm not sure that I'm personally going to be able to go to PsyOp.
Polinode
will be there.
Polinode will be there. Okay. He slips it in at the last second.
Well, I did 3 trips to the US last year. So I'm trying to keep the number of trips that I go to the US somewhat more manageable this year.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, you had done some fascinating work in the past, like specific to people analytics too, of creating these networks. I don't know, I can pull it up on the screen. You had this network you mapped out all the people analytics influencers using LinkedIn data. What was kind of the story behind that?
Yeah, so that was actually, we were at another conference. And I started to think to myself, I wonder how all the different people at this conference and the exhibitors at this conference are connected together, because there are obviously all kinds of different strategic relationships and partnerships, competitors. And so the idea was to map like the ecosystem around this HR tech conference. And so I thought, well, where do I get the data to kind of map that ecosystem? And the idea came to me that when you look at a LinkedIn profile for a company to begin with, you see on the right-hand side, you see the other companies that people who viewed that profile have also viewed, so that people also viewed data. And that, of course, is network data. So we were able to kind of extract that data from LinkedIn that people also viewed data and kind of map originally it was the HR tech ecosystem. And then once we did that, we also realized that we could do the same thing for the profiles of individuals. So just start with, a seed set of nodes or people in a particular space, and then use the people also view data to kind of map the ecosystem around those kind of seed nodes. And so what we did then was use, a group of seeds, just a handful of seeds in the people analytics space. So folks like, Richard Rosenhau, Heather Whiteman, a few other people, just a few seeds, and then we expand from there and iterate on the network and create the network of people analytics practitioners globally. Find the different clusters, find the people who have kind of outsized influence, just kind of based on those LinkedIn connections. So that was the genesis of it.
How big is Cole's node?
I think Cole's pretty big.
It should be.
I'm pretty big. The thing that I'm proud of, and you can see this on the screen if you're looking at it, is I'm like literally smack dab in the center of the network.
Very central, man.
Very central. And the thing that I found interesting from it, and we can go to the HR tech influencers one in a minute, but the people analytics one was if you just chop off the right-hand third, that's like, and again, there are exceptions to this because, some of these companies have, offices in like Chicago or New York or wherever, but it's almost all made up of the Bay Area. And I was like, my goodness, I didn't realize how central the Bay Area was to the people analytics field, because the very center area where I'm a part of it, it's actually not that big of a cluster. And it's got people from Europe. It's got people from all over the US. It's got some folks from different places. And then it's kind of got the David Green connection to a bunch of like what I would call like more traditional influencers, like the, Adam Grants and that type, Josh Bursons and those type of people. But in the very center, it's actually a smaller cluster that's kind of globally distributed than just the San Francisco cluster. And that was fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I think that also illustrates just some basic principles of network analysis. It's just homophily, geographic homophily right there. So these people in the Bay Area connect to one another, and they show up next to each other. One point is like, that's a beautiful graph. That looks absolutely beautiful. The colors on the black background is wonderful. Like, are you scraping this LinkedIn data by hand, or is it like you have like some sort of
no, we
automated
don't do it by hand. We have an automated process
for
pulling that data in. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Well, give us a little bit of the magic sauce. Like, how do you kind of scrape this type of data? And like, I'm assuming you're using the Polinode platform to put it together. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, for this LinkedIn data, and obviously, this is just it's not what we do on a day-to-day basis. This is using Polinode for an interesting application, right? But for this data, we use, and there's a number of them. There's third-party services that will, allow you to. They do all the difficult things for you in terms of extracting that data from LinkedIn, and then you basically, because LinkedIn doesn't have any APIs, right? And so you can't use an API to extract the LinkedIn data, but basically what they then present is an API for you to query. And so we use effectively a third-party service API to pull that data in, and we write a script. And then Polinode has its own API, so we then write code that pushes that data as a network to Polinode. And so it's all automated, and all you have to do on our end is provide a seed set of nodes, and you get that kind of expanded resulting network.
How does this work for like a company that's interested in Polinode? Like they may have a use case, they may have a general idea of what they want, and they come to you. And what's the next step in the process?
Yeah, I mean, so what we do is, what we are is we're a platform for organizational network analysis, right? And so we typically have a discussion with them about well, what are their strategic priorities? Because I think, as you'll both be aware, one of the challenges of organizational network analysis is that there are so many different things that you can do with it, right? And so what we always try to focus on is understanding, what are the strategic priorities that the organization is looking for. And sometimes they come with, one thing in mind or two things in mind, but there's often a discussion about, is it the identification of emerging talent? Is diversity, equity, and inclusion a priority? Is there a specific reason why you want to identify influencers and so on? And so it's about understanding where, what their priorities are and what would be most valuable for them. And that's often a two-way discussion. And then also often, because Polinode is a platform for both passive as well as active organizational network analysis, right? So on the one end, it's extracting data potentially from email log files or from enterprise social networks and so on. And on the other, it's asking people questions. Active ONA, like who do you go to for advice? Who do you work with often? Those types of questions, right? And so there's also often a discussion about whether active ONA is the right approach or passive ONA is the right approach, or sometimes it's a combination of both. Once we understand what the priorities are, and once we have an approach in mind, it's then about executing that approach as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's fascinating. I'm curious, like, how did you get into people analytics originally, and like, why did you create Polinode in the first place?
Yeah. So my background's a little bit different to most people in people analytics. So I actually came to the people analytics world via investment banking. So straight out of college, or university as we call it in Australia, I joined Goldman Sachs. So I spent 6 years doing M&A advisory. So 4 years
Could have
here.
used Polinode for that.
I think that there's some really interesting use cases that relate to M&A, right? So one that doesn't get talked about that often, and is actually kind of a lot less popular than I thought it would be when I first started Polinode, is M&A integration, right? Like bringing two companies together.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah, it's not as far-fetched as one might think, but yes, 4 years in Sydney, and then 2 years in New York. So I worked at Goldman for 2 years in New York. And whilst I was in New York, I got appointed to an internal committee that was looking at things like, attrition and overload and those types of, call them HR issues, maybe even people analytics issues as well, right? But not really in the people analytics space, still in the M&A space. And I started to think about Goldman and organizations generally as networks at that time. And I pretty soon realized that I wasn't the first person to think about organizations as networks, as obviously, organizational network analysis has been around for a while, right? And even this was 10 years ago when I first started to look at the space. But I also realized that there wasn't really a tool to make powerful organizational network analysis accessible for people. And so I decided that what I wanted to do was basically to build that tool. So I resigned from my job in New York at Goldman and moved back to Sydney and started building Polinode. And this is probably really before the people analytics field itself really kind of exploded and grew that strongly as well. And definitely before ONA kind of had the significant kind of spike in popularity that it's had over the last few years. Yeah, that's basically why I built Polinode, to help people understand and improve the way that organizations function by looking at them and understanding them, through the lens of networks.
It's an orthogonal data point, right? We have surveys and we have demographic information, but the way people communicate is just totally different from anything else. And I get annoyed when people say like, "Well, you can't really do anything with network data." It's like, well, you can't do anything with engagement data either, really, right? Like
Yeah.
you got to be a little creative. You got to think about the problem. You got to do this sort of thing. What what are some like easy entrances into network analysis, or like what are the most common issues that companies are facing that they can dip their toe into network analysis and start exploring the possibilities?
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's really kind of three bread and butter, I like to call them, kind of applications of ONA, right? Historically, there's been two, but kind of a third one has emerged, I'd say, in the last couple of years. The first is really, understanding and improving collaboration, right? So wherever there are kind of silos, wherever there are teams that are, not working together where one would expect them to be working together, kind of mapping that and understanding that and using the network data to kind of help break through those barriers, improve that collaboration. Also, where there are potentially groups that might be collaborating more than you might want as well, right? So it's not
Oh,
always less, it's
absolutely.
more too. So yeah, I would say the collaboration one is definitely, the bread and butter of ONA. The other one, and this one has a bunch of different sub applications or sub uses of it, but it's very much at the core of ONA, is the identification of influences, right? So finding people who have outsized influence in an organization. And often those are people that are kind of at the mid or more junior levels. You're often really interested in finding the people who have outsized influence. We often call them shop floor influencers, right? And then the question becomes, what do you do with those identified influences? And that's why I say they're kind of different sub areas, right? But you might, for example, put them in a room with the executive leadership team and just kind of use that to break through all the layers in terms of communication and improve the bidirectional communication from those kind of mid-level or more junior people with the more senior people in the room. But there are a whole range of different applications for those kind of identified influences. Change agent identification, which is historically done, I think quite badly in an organization. That's another kind of classic example for those kind of identified influences. And then the third one that I would say is kind of like an emerging bread and butter use case or application of ONA is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So
Yes.
it's really the inclusion side of DE&I. So understanding where in your organization, to give you a classic example, looking at gender, where is there less connection, particularly from a mentorship standpoint, between previously identified high potential, high performance females and more senior managers in the organization? Those types of questions.
Yeah, there's no real need to have diversity if people are not actually talking to each other, right? I mean, this is the core of inclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can be diverse without being inclusive.
Absolutely.
Well, I wanted to come back to the second use case about key influencers for a second, and we referenced this earlier about the work you guys did using LinkedIn data to identify HR tech influencers. And this one was personal for me because at the HR Tech conference last year, I guess I can say this now because it's a little dated. They put out this list of the top 100 HR tech influencers, and many other people took issue with quite a few of the influencers, and so it didn't seem very meritocratic. And noticed that you guys put this together and you created a kind of an alternative list of who should have been in there had they done it more meritocratically.
I love this. I love
and
this.
number 2 on the list was Cole Napper. And I was just like, all right, because Dave Ulrich, I mean, he's a legend. And so being number 2 behind Dave Ulrich, and then you have people, I mean, these are really well-known commodities like Ben Eubanks and Michael Moon and William Tincup and Ben Teich. And you go down the list and there's so many people that are just fantastic that were left off. And so I was like, thank you, Polinode. And I kept spamming the HR Tech conference, like saying, like, look, being really passive aggressive, like, look at this list. Yeah, look at this list. And so thank you for doing this, Andrew.
No worries. Got interesting story behind that one. When we originally decided to do that work, the working title for it was Hidden Influences. We wanted to find the hidden influences. So using the 100 that the HR Tech conferences had identified, we thought, well, who are the people that are probably less well known? Just using those 100 as like the seed nodes for this expansive network.
Mm-hmm.
And then we came up with that kind of list of 30, and we thought, well, actually, I know a bunch of these people personally, and these are really, well-known names. So we can't call it hidden influencers anymore because they're not really hidden at all.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, when you go back to the something you brought up earlier, you had mentioned active versus passive ONA, and what is the relationship between either active or passive in engagement surveys? Because I know it seems like some companies have kind of dipped their toes in the water. And do you have kind of a point of view or a perspective on using, Polinode or ONA with engagement surveys?
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting question. So the thing that people have actually been doing with Polinode is actually collecting engagement data alongside network data, because our relationship-based survey tools, we have a built-in relationship-based survey tool. It's very flexible, so you can ask literally any question that you like. So of course it's designed to ask those types of relationship questions that I mentioned previously. So who do you go to for advice? Who do you want more access to? Who do you view as a source of knowledge, and so on? But you can actually use it to ask open text questions, right? And of course, open text questions can be used as really powerful engagement questions as well as your standard matrix questions where you have an agree, disagree, like a type, 4 different engagement questions. So one of the really interesting things that you can do around engagement data and network data is actually to collect the two together. So to ask, your standard or non-standard kind of battery of engagement questions alongside network questions. And then that leads to some really powerful questions that you can ask of the combined data. For example, are the people that are more engaged, are they more central in the network? Are they more peripheral in the network? Because when you actually kind of analyze the engagement data together with the network data, the relationship is not always what you would expect, and it's not always consistent across the organization as well, because somebody can be really central in the network, and partially perhaps as a result of that centrality, they can be overloaded, right? And that because they're overloaded on some of the different dimensions of engagement, that can be reflected, right? And so you can understand whether there is a positive or negative relationship between, for example, centrality in the network and different measures of engagement.
I think you hit on like an important point there around the clustering of engagement. So it's one of the beauties of network analysis that you can identify these pockets of, say, disengagement when you added these other data points to it. They do not necessarily align to the organizational structure, right? It has to deal with how people actually interact. And like when you combine that with, say, like key players, if you have a disengaged key player, someone with a massive network can spread their bad attitude across a bunch of people. Now you got a real freaking problem, right? It's great, and you got to go talk to them or get them out or do something with them because they're gonna. It's rotten apples essentially.
Yeah, and that kind of relates as well to the cultural influencer point that we were talking about earlier. Too,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. In the other direction.
Yeah, well, but cultural influences don't always have to be positive cultural influences. So depending on the way that you design the question, sometimes we want to specifically target the identification of positive cultural influences, but sometimes the most powerful cultural influences to identify are actually those people who might not necessarily be having a positive influence on culture as well.
Yeah, Cole's number 2 on this tech list. I mean, we need to probably talk to him.
They're not positive influencers.
They just said influencer, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, Cole. Not necessarily.
No. Well, we had Hemerson on a few weeks ago from Roche. It seems like you all have been doing some really cool work with them, and even like some of the other providers and partners that you have. Do you want to talk at all about some of the cool work that you've got going on? And like I hear, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a big release coming out soon in Polinode as well. Do you want to pimp that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think firstly, obviously, Hemerson is a terrific guy. I think you guys will enjoy chatting to him, and he's been doing some really amazing work with Roche, some really interesting, I think, cutting edge stuff. So, we were speaking about passive organizational network analysis before, and one of the things with passive ONA is people often think about email data. They often think about enterprise social network data, like Slack data or Microsoft Teams data and so on. But what people often don't think about is all the other data that naturally exists in an organization as well.
Like what?
What Hemerson has been doing at Roche with the team at Roche is tapping into opportunity marketplace data. So at Roche, they've got this really active opportunity marketplace where people can post these kind of gigs or projects, and then anybody globally can put their hand up and say, I have these skills and I'm interested in working on this project. And then the host can select a group of people and they will work on this particular project. And we're talking about, I think it's thousands of people and probably about 1,000 of these projects kind of globally over quite a large workforce. And that is a classic network, right? You have people who are globally connected through these different projects. And so what we've worked together with Hemerson on is extracting this data from this opportunity marketplace and then analyzing it as a network, the connections that are created between people through the participation in this kind of large scale opportunity marketplace. And then the really interesting and I think quite innovative thing that the team at Roche has done is actually democratize that data. So they're giving access to people, and this is people outside of people analytics. These are people kind of at the the coalface of the organization working on these different projects. So those people who want access to these interactive networks in Polinode that describe these kind of global collaboration networks, as they call it, have received access to kind of navigate and understand the connections that are created as this project and kind of give them insight into this massive global collaboration network. So, really interesting work that Roche has been doing on that. And then Polinode 2.0 was your other question, which I'm super excited about.
Well, what is Polinode 2.0? Come on, you're burying the lead, man.
Well, we've been working on it for about 2 years now. So I started Polinode 10 years ago now, and we've been getting a lot of feedback and ideas and suggestions from people over that time. And Polinode 2.0 is a full rebuild of essentially the entire front end of Polinode that incorporates a whole bunch of that feedback. So there's literally a whole bunch of new features, a new design, new look. Everything is now a module, so everything can be turned on and off. We've got a networks module, a surveys module. We've got some other modules as well, passive data module, and so on. The networks use WebGL, so tap into the GPU on your computer. But one of the most exciting things as well is we will shortly be enabling secure embedding so that other people can use the Polinode interactive networks functionality, for example, in other web applications and so on.
Oh, fascinating.
This
I
2.0
thought you said secure. I thought you said secure betting, like betting online for football games. But I interrupted you, Scott. Sorry.
No, I was going to ask if 2.0 just makes Cole the most central node in every network.
That's right. It's completely designed to put Cole, to bump him up the list to number one.
Broke his ego at every turn. Y'all want to do some confusion matrix?
Yeah, man. Let's check it out.
The confusion matrix.
All right. We have we'll call it a quiz. This isn't really extravagant. As always, Cole will be the arbiter of truth. If your answers, Andrew, satisfy him, he will provide you with a social media tile that you can share online.
Perfect.
Everyone, feel free to participate here. Okay, these are odd facts about Australia, and I'll ask you about them.
Oh, no.
Just know, Andrew, I was so fascinated, not just about Polinode, but about the fact that you live in Australia, having you on the podcast. So I've been wanting to talk about this stuff if it wasn't clear with the crocodiles comment earlier.
I wonder if my Australian citizenship might be revoked if I don't get a high enough score.
Cole specifically asked me to create this little game show, if you will. But okay, are we ready?
Yeah.
Australia has the world's longest golf course. How long is it?
Golf course?
Golf course.
Oh my.
I don't have any supporting evidence of this, by the way. It's just what a website told me.
Okay. So
Can I give you a hint as to not how long it is? I don't know the answer, but the average, like an average golf course, is probably 6,500 yards. I don't know what that is in meters.
you're making it more hard rather than easier.
Yeah.
You're going imperial to metric. This is hard.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is when you add up the length of all of the holes, right?
I will tell you it's measured in miles. We'll put it that way. It's big.
Oh, now I don't even know the answer.
If
to
it's
that.
measured in miles, it can't possibly be in Australia.
Well, I think an average golf course is like 5 miles if you're walking. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but
That sounds
something
about
like that.
right.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll go for 8 miles.
Cole, you got to guess?
I'm gonna say 6.75.
Well, let's try 850 miles.
No.
850 miles. Okay, we'll go largest again. The largest cattle station, I guess that's a ranch, in the world is located in Australia. How big is it?
I think
Actually, it's bigger. It's bigger than, we'll call it a country. What country
I think
is
it's
it
in the
bigger
Northern
than?
Territory. I have no idea how big it is, but I believe it's sold in the last few years.
Oh, geez, who's got that kind of money? Is it Goldman Sachs? They coming through?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's probably definitely international. So is this measured in hectares or square kilometers or square miles?
It's just bigger than a country. There's a country.
Oh, I've got to guess the country.
Or an approximately sized country, I suppose.
All right.
France.
France. That's bigger than the Northern Territory. That's bigger than
Snoop Dogg thinks you're high.
I guess
it's Israel. It's bigger than Israel. Which
I was gonna say Luxembourg or something like that. Yeah.
How long would it take you to visit every beach in Australia if you visited one per day?
Ooh.
Oh wow.
Okay, we got a lot of beaches. We have a lot of beaches. So
one per day.
20
I'm
years.
gonna say 3 years. Yeah.
20 years.
There are 10,600 and change. There's 29 years.
Ooh.
Wow.
29 years.
That's
I'm sure
insane.
they're all not top notch, but I mean, come on.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Okay, Aussies drink a lot. Approximately how many bottles of beer per each adult a year?
A year. Okay. I don't think we're the biggest drinkers in the world. I think we're the biggest gamblers in the world, but I don't think we're the biggest drinkers in the world.
That is on the list. The gambling thing is on the list.
Wow. Do I get extra marks for preempting
I think
questions?
you do. I'll give you a fun fact just associated with that real quick. 20% of all of the slot machines are in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
In the world.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the beer.
Okay, I'm going to guess an average of 2 per day. So let's say 800 a year.
Cole.
I'm gonna use Price is Right rules and just say one beneath what he said.
I think that's how you lose, actually.
or whatever.
But I mean that's a good guess. 2 per day. It's 680 bottles per beer per adult.
Wow.
Okay. Let's see what else we got here. I'll try to pick something. Okay, here a gay bar in Melbourne won the legal right to ban women from the bar. Why?
This sounds like an answer that gets you fired.
Yeah.
You want me to give it to you?
Because perhaps it was so popular, women were going there, and so they were displacing the intended patrons.
Cole, anything?
I got nothing, man.
It's pretty simple. They made the men uncomfortable.
Oh.
Well, fair enough.
Let's see. We'll do one more. Let me find something good.
I got a question while you're looking it up.
Yeah, please do.
Do you know what Pine Valley is, Andrew?
Pine Valley.
Yeah.
No.
I watched a show on Netflix about it. It's a fictional. It's a real place, but it's a fictional show about a base in the middle of Australia that's like a joint venture between Australia and the United States that does like all the spying satellites around the world. It was fascinating.
Yeah. 5 Eyes, right?
Yep.
Okay, last one. Former Prime Minister Bob Hawke set a world record for doing what?
Sculling a beer.
Ding,
This
ding,
much,
ding.
I definitely would have had my Australian citizenship revoked if I got that wrong.
2.5
hey,
pints and 2.5 pints in 11 seconds.
Yeah.
sculling? What is sculling?
Yeah.
Drinking it as fast as you can.
Oh, so it's like chugging or like funneling a beer or something like that, kind of.
Exactly.
Okay.
He was very, very good at that. And then also when he would go to the cricket, everybody would encourage him to drink a beer as quickly as he can.
We need more of
That's
this.
a fascinating thing to be known for.
So, how did Andrew do, Cole?
I think he won. I don't know what he won.
I think
but
we
I think
all
he
won.
won.
I think we all won.
Anyway, well, Andrew, I'm sure you've been waiting with bated breath, but you ready to do some nerdery?
Yeah. Bring on the nerdery.
The nerdery.
I'm going to read something I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I found this post from a girl named Casey Mockel, I think is how you pronounce it. And it's titled, "It is literally impossible to be a job seeker." And I just thought there was so much wisdom in this, but it says, "You have to be open to work, but not obvious with a green banner that you are open to work. You can't say outright to say that you're looking for a job. You have to say you're ready to move on to your next adventure or challenge. But you also have to be open to work. You have to be authentic, but also don't express any real struggles or say anything that may be construed as negative. You have to have a salary range that fits your skills and the value you bring, but you shouldn't ask about the salary if it's not posted or negotiate for more if it's too low, because that's crass. You have to show that you're passionate about the role, but not too passionate, because then you are desperate. You have to be 100% qualified, but you can't be overqualified, then you will get bored and leave. You have to have room for growth, but also meet all the desired, preferred, and wish list qualifications. Show how your unique background benefits the role, but also come from the exact school, company, and zip code they prefer." And this goes on and on and on. And I was like, wow, that, like, in a nutshell, it was like, yeah, it literally is impossible to be a job seeker. And just over the last, I don't know, year and a half, basically ever since like they started doing kind of some of the mass tech layoffs, I've spoken with so many people that have been going through this and experienced this exact same thing. And this girl, Casey, just distilled it better than anyone I have ever heard. I don't know. How did you guys react when you read this?
It's enough to make you want to start a company, right?
Just get out of it altogether. Put it all in your own hands.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely empathize with it, because I've had friends who have been searching for jobs, and I think what she describes there is consistent. But from my own perspective, I haven't had to look for a job for 15 years. So the only time I ever went through kind of a formal interview process was when I interviewed for Goldman Sachs many years ago. But that said, I think what she says kind of, for me, highlights the importance of the interview process, right? When you're actually looking for people, and how important it is to have an empathetic interview process, and to try to find people's strengths, rather than when you're interviewing people, look for the weaknesses and the flaws. So when I was reading that was one of the reflections that came out for me.
It's tough out there for a player, right? I mean, like you're trying your best. Well, I mean, like this is classic signaling theory. Like you see it in dating. Like you want to be into them, but not too into them, right? And like you see it in college coaching searches. Like I will go to your university, but only if you ask me to. All this sort of stuff, and it makes perfect sense that you would see this here. I think that organizations are essentially looking for well-rounded people, I guess. Like you can't be like too enthusiastic, which actually the antithesis, we talked about engagement earlier. You're looking for the highest engagement possible in your organization, but maybe that's not ideal, actually.
Yeah.
Mm.
Everybody wants to eat at a 5-star restaurant for fast food prices. That's what I see it kind of distilling down to, is like, you just make it to where, if you can, again, get somebody the impossible, or what recruiters sometimes call the purple unicorns, out there. And the reason why you have to look for purple unicorns is because of everything that was said in this little diatribe by Casey. Is like, it's just impossible to be a job seeker.
During the interview process, they put a cognitive load on you. Like, you probably need a paycheck, right? Or it's something that you want. So, like, you're extra eager, but obviously, if you're too eager, then like you're gonna, fumble your words or just be too much.
Yeah, you can't be nervous, right? Because you can't want it too much, because then you'll come across nervous and overeager.
Yep, exactly. Well, Scott, do you want to tee up the next one?
Where are we going now?
I don't even know what this is, to be honest with you, but Vanderpump Rules.
Yes. So I wouldn't go as far as to call this a prized possession, but I've been studying networks for several years now, and I found this just on Instagram, probably like 2019, and whoever this user is, essentially mapped out the Vanderpump network on a napkin and took a photo of it and like posted online. And I think it's so great. Are either you fans of Vanderpump?
I've never even heard the words until you shared this with me.
I have not heard of it previously. But thank you so much for introducing it.
Oh my! It is absolutely insane. I get dragged to Vanderpump things every so often. I have been to the Vanderpump restaurant in Caesar's Palace in Vegas. It is very girly and very expensive and very good. I will put it that way.
But what is it? Like,
it's a TV show about ostensibly a restaurant. So like, there's fans out there that are going to get on my butt here because I don't really fully understand it. And it's pure insanity. Everyone is like fighting constantly or sleeping with each other, which is the point of this network. This is a very simple network, but I think it's great because it offers a couple different principles around network analysis. One, we have two different node ties or type of edges here. Like one is sex, and that's all the interconnections here. So all these people are sleeping with each other.
Oh my God.
The green lines are violence. So these are people that hit each other, or, whatever they did with each other. But with just a simple network, I don't know, there's maybe 20 people here, you could already start picking out central players and like how their interrelations work, or like this Tom Sandoval. He's an insane looking alien guy, and he's always in trouble. But he has high betweenness here between Kristen and Ariana. You can already understand how this like sexual relationship would work in his distant favor, all these sort of things. But you can see like principles such as density of ties. So obviously sex has had higher density. You can start seeing, once again, the key players in the network.
Well, and also, what I find quite interesting is that the sex network is, of course, undirected, and the physical violence is a directed network.
That makes sense. I mean, that's another principle right there. Direction of network.
I mean, I find like just from looking at it, I didn't actually look at what the colors of the lines meant until you said this. But it looks like there's a strong correlation between sex and physical violence in here too.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of the violence.
I'll just say this for listeners: this episode versus pretty much any episode we've ever had is probably a good one to watch on YouTube. A lot of this is not going to make any sense unless you've seen what we're showing on the screen.
I'll say two more things. Like one, you don't need a whole lot of data to start understanding your network, right? You don't need to scrape everything. Of course, Polinode can offer those sort of services and, get you hooked up there. But just a simple back the napkin, you already starting to understand the network, et cetera. But you brought up this as well earlier. You don't necessarily need to have communication ties. You can also have, different sort of relationships between people that will have meaningful connections in the network. It doesn't have to be, say, emailing one another to be totally robust.
Well, what's fascinating is, Andrew, you actually sent over, I guess, the same thing,
yes,
all done in Polinode.
I love it.
Exactly. So
explain this.
When you sent me a copy of that image, I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. I wonder if we can just create it in Polinode. And that's exactly what we did. We just took the raw data from that image, and because Polinode you can upload literally any network or connected data to analyze in Polinode. We uploaded that data, the Vanderpump's rules data, into Polinode, and it automatically runs a layout algorithm. So it looks a little bit different because, of course, when you're hand drawing the network, you're not able to just run a layout algorithm in your head. And so we've got the nodes kind of positioned according to a force-directed layout algorithm, and we've colored the edges by physical violence or a sexual relationship. Oh, and then the other thing that we've done here, in addition to what you saw in that hand-drawn diagram, is we've actually applied a community detection algorithm. So basically an algorithm that partitions the nodes in the network into groups that are kind of more connected with each other than they are to the rest of the network. So basically higher density of connections within the group. And so you can see that based on these connections, there's a total of 5 different informal communities, and what those communities represent. So for example, you've got Kristen in the center of one community, Stasi in another community, and so on.
Well, like I've never seen this show, but I'm just going to make a hypothesis based on this ONA that Kristen is just a psycho.
Or Kristen definitely knows stuff about everybody. If you want to know about the network, you go to Kristen, right? She can tell you a little bit about everybody.
Okay. She's got a bunch of stuff going on here.
I wish I knew more about the show to like offer some like SME advice or some more colorful analysis. I do know that Sandoval is a highly controversial figure because of his betweenness.
Okay. I guess we'll leave it at that. Yes. I will say, if you are curious about any of these Polinode graphs that we've showed, we will link all of them in the show notes, so you can go find out for yourself if you're a Vanderpump Rules fan, like what's going on here.
You want to do the last one?
Yeah, let's do the last one.
Okay, this is a HBR. It's how to lead across siloed organizations. So a key challenge of CEOs is to get their executives to work together in cross-functional capacity, because it's actually essential for an organization's success. So the pandemic, of course, accelerated a lot of this siloing behavior. So we became geographically distributed. We have less frequent face-to-face interactions, and overall, there's just like a lack of enterprise-wide incentives to work in that sort of way. But some people can't do it. They have this sort of lateral agility, so they can have an expanded mindset, so they can see big picture. They have cognitive skills such as curiosity, and engage in innovative practices such as like we each bring different sort of things to the table and we can make something better. So how do you actually get better? Well, you can take a mental snapshot of your own network, and also assess how much time you spend with different sort of people, and overall just understand the goals of your peers and how you can help contribute for the overall organizational good.
Yeah. When I looked through this one, the thing that I found that was interesting, that because I had done some of this work in the past, and they said that the CEOs, and this is a common CEO problem, but I don't think many people that work in businesses understand this, is they really have a tough time getting their executive teams to work together because of the siloed nature of how each executive treats their business unit as kind of independent. And it creates this kind of gridlock and chaos. And the CEO's common complaint is, I'm the only one in the company that sees the whole entire picture. And one of the things that I've said before about people analytics is it's one of the very few resources in the entire company that sees ththings through the lens of the CEO. And so it's one of the few functions that actually does look at the entire company and wants to break down barriers. Like if we've talked a lot on the podcast before about how incentives lead good people to do bad things. And one of the things is most people's incentives are to be siloed, right? And so there's very few kind of counterweights to that. I would say a chief people officer is actually one of them, because they need to look at the entire company, and people analytics within the HR functions happens to be another. And so, but it's a challenge to break down these silos. You mentioned earlier, Andrew, like tips and tricks around like how you could use ONA for like M&A or for change management. One of the key use cases of change management is usually breaking down silos. So I don't know, do you have kind of a Polinode
Yeah.
spin on this?
Well, absolutely. So I think people, when they think about ONA, they often think about whole of company organizational network analysis, like either tapping into all of the passive data or running a whole of company active ONA. Some really interesting and powerful and successful ONAs that I've seen are actually with much smaller groups, including executive leadership team +1 or executive leadership team +2. So you can run an ONA with 20 people, with 30 people, with 40 people, right? Just the most senior folks. And actually,
Or just Vanderpump Rules?
just Vanderpump Rules. But
Who's sleeping with who?
maybe we don't ask that question. But just in that kind of executive leadership team, and then show it to that team, right? And show people what does the network look like in order for them to understand where there is an absence of collaboration, which people should be talking more to other people but aren't. Show them those barriers, and that can be just a really effective way, as this article describes, for encouraging that kind of cross-functional connection and relationship at that level.
I think that's the beauty too, because like I understand like who I talk to. I have a somewhat of an understanding who Cole talks to, but not really. So you can't really see more than two people away, not with any sort of accuracy. But if you like put like this like helicopter view in front of them of like here's how the network's functioning, who's actually talking to each other, it becomes crystal clear at that point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, small ONAs can be incredibly powerful.
I think that incentive structure that you mentioned too, Cole, is like really powerful. Like when your performance is based on how you run your organization, which I'm going to run it like a company. It's like, well, if you're running a company, like you don't want any dependencies. You don't want any dependencies. You're not going to collaborate.
Yep.
Why would you collaborate? The incentive structure in there.
But the other thing that occurred to me when I read this article as well is how much it emphasizes the role of the leader, the leader reaching out cross-functionally and collaborating with other leaders. But
yeah,
I think it's also really important for the leader of a team or a group to encourage cross-collaboration within his or her own group as well. So not necessarily always directly him or herself, but to encourage and promote and reward people within their team working across teams as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you do a lot of like maybe not cross company collaboration, but cross world collaboration? I mean, you're working American hours and Australian hours. How do you do that effectively?
Wake up early in the morning. I mean, the truth is my days are relatively long because you have working with the US in particular in the morning in Australian time, and then I also do a lot of work with Europe in the evenings. But I think the way that I do that is I take breaks at lunchtime. So the least intense part of my day is often in the middle of the day. And so I think
is that swim time? Swim time? Go in the ocean?
Swim time is generally the weekends. I do try to go to the gym during lunchtime, but there's often not enough time to go to the ocean during lunchtime. But it's amazing what you can do as well just with Zoom. So I think it's really possible to build very real relationships with people all around the world over Zoom. Of course, it's much better to see people in person, which is why I do try to make trips to the US and to Europe, at least a few times a year. But it's the combination of the occasional in person, but then also video calls and talking to people online. These days it makes it very possible to span the world and not be tied down to Australia at all.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of not being tied down to Australia, congratulations are in order. I know that you just got married and were out of the country on your honeymoon, so I appreciate you coming back to join us. You want to talk at all about your honeymoon?
The honeymoon was great. Can thoroughly recommend Vietnam. We had a lovely honeymoon in Vietnam. Got back 3 days ago, feeling refreshed.
Do you do any ocean swimming in Vietnam?
A little bit of we spent. So I'm generally not a resort guy. I generally
Okay.
prefer not resorts. But at the end of the honeymoon, we decided to spend 3 days in a resort, just to have a bit of relaxation, because the lead up to a wedding and everything that goes along with that can be quite intense. And Hanoi itself, which is where we were before, can also be quite intense. So yeah, we spent a few days in a resort, and then had a lovely long pool, and I was able to get some swims in there.
It's a tough life you live.
It's a tough life.
That's fascinating.
Thanks so much for being on the pod, Andrew. How can folks get in touch with you and Polinode if they want to reach out?
Yeah, I think Twitter, you'll find me on Twitter, and Pits on Twitter. You'll also find Polinode there. LinkedIn is always really good. Look me up on LinkedIn. I'm not hard to find on LinkedIn. And otherwise, yeah, send us a message via the website if you want to.
Fantastic. Well, you've been fun to have on, Andrew. Thanks so much for joining us today.
No, thank you guys. It's been terrific.
Awesome. Well, you've been listening to Directionally Correct, the People Analytics podcast with Colin Scott and Andrew Pitts. Thanks for joining us, Andrew.
Hey guys, Directionally Correct is dedicated to you, our listeners, to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. By supporting this podcast, you are helping us continue to provide valuable insights and knowledge to our listeners. Please consider becoming a patron of the podcast. You can find the link to sign up in the show notes or at patron.podbean.com/directionallycorrect. Thanks for your support.